why not do an interview with Tucker Carlson? I got in trouble for reaching out to an American commentator without telling people. I didn't reach out to him. And I was told that he's banned from the network. And I was like, well, why? And they're like, well, he's a white nationalist.
I'm about to make a very divisive statement, but it needs to be said. At this point, it just feels like the Mark Carney government and the Liberals, along with our country of Canada, are a walking embodiment on the global stage of what a Dallas Cowboys or a Toronto Maple Leafs team truly is. The embodiment of the statement of whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Everything we said we were going to predict if Carney ever got a win in the last election is starting to come to fruition. Canadian energy companies are now departing and investing south of the border. This Liberal government has decided to drop legal challenges in the courts because, well, they don't really have any standing. And then as well as our state broadcaster, CBC, well, gets exposed today all the more. As you remember Travis Dunrod, you remember that guy, the guy who's been saying, I've been silenced by the CBC and they won't allow him to leave even though he full on quit? Well, he finally broke his silence and baby, it's electrifying. We have this and so much more. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us to grow, helps us to get to new audiences, and helps people see that there is something different than what the mainstream media has to offer. Now, let's get into our first story, shall we? So as I said, Travis Dunrod broke his silence with an hour and 15-minute long podcast that he launched yesterday. There's some clips that came out of it that were like, oh, that was fairly interesting. And I think the one that was the most interesting was his conversation around the likes of Tucker Carlson. He had the opportunity as an anchor and running a show on CBC to interview Tucker Carlson after Tucker had interviewed Danielle Smith. And CBC wasn't too happy with this. And this 3-minute clip, Travis breaks down the whole situation of what happened, and baby, you're gonna get a load of this.
So I had to send this apologetic email where I was like, I'm so sorry I didn't follow the protocols.
And this happened again pretty early on when you were contacted by a prominent American.
Tucker Carlson called me.
Okay, Tucker. Let's just
Tucker Carlson called me, and by the way, he's coming on this show, and I'm supposed to go on his show to talk about all this stuff. And I don't know Tucker Carlson. I didn't have his phone number in my phone or anything like that. My phone rang one day, and it was Tucker Carlson. And he said, I watched your Intersection panel. I'm up here in Canada. I like the Intersection panel. I'm going to interview Danielle Smith for this fireside chat, the Premier of Alberta. And I'd like to come on the show. And I thought, well, that's actually, there's news value to it because he's interviewing Danielle Smith. He's in Canada. There were news stories about it. Why not do an interview with Tucker Carlson? However, I got in trouble for reaching out to an American commentator without telling people. I didn't reach out to him. And I was also told, and CBC probably will say, no, that never happened. I was told that he's banned from the network. And then I was pulled into a meeting, basically, and I was like, well, why? And they're like, well, he's a white nationalist. I'm like, I don't necessarily know if that's the case.
Who else is banned on the network?
Well, that's the thing, right? There are a lot of people banned on my show.
In a different way, meaning you weren't allowed to ask
Listen,
them.
I had a reporter call me the other day who was, and will remain nameless because we're good friends, but was in one of these editorial meetings, and they were telling me they wanted to have somebody on a particular issue, and they were told that person's not allowed on, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how that decision is made. How they're actually banning people from coming on now.
And you kind of pointed out how silly this all was. Because if you had wanted to ask...
Well, they pulled me into a boardroom. I'll tell you what happened, right? They pulled me, these two executives that are still there, they pulled me into a boardroom. I was on a Thursday, I had her on Friday, I was in a boardroom. Yanked into this meeting where they're like, you did this, you did that, you called this person, you had, you didn't follow the protocols, and we're pulling you off the air today. And I'm like looking at them and I'm like, this is the fucking brain trust that is running this network, that they think having like me off the air the day after I have a conservative, which was one of the very few times a conservative prominent one came on the network, would look good optics wise. But this never even occurred to them. And I said, that's probably not a good look, guys. You probably want to leave the room and reconsider that. And they did. And then they came back and they're like, okay, yeah, you can do the show. But I mean, again, it goes back to that initial conversation where I was threatened to be pulled off the backfill.
So there's a bit of a taste of what happens behind the scenes at the CBC. The things that we all knew, things that we've espoused, things that we've talked about, things that were clearly obvious from what we were seeing and being told, no, that's not happening. We'll continue giving them our tax dollars. No, they actively suppress conservative voices. They actively try to penalize on-air personalities for seeming just wanting to bring on all voices on. No, it can only be the left because they're the only ones that are right. And it was fairly interesting to even talk about the fact that Tucker Carlson reached out to him, knew about his panel, knew about the work he was doing. Fascinating work, fascinating situation. And to be told that you are going to be penalized and we are going to punish you for reaching out to Tucker Carlson, an American commentator. Didn't go through the protocols, didn't do this. Well, why? Simple question, why? And they said, he's a white nationalist. That's from the CBC themselves. Can't have Tucker on because he's a white nationalist. Clearly, you've never spoken to the man. Clearly, you've never heard of the man. Clearly, you're just going off of what you think you know of the man. But this shows what is happening at this broadcasting corporation that uses our tax dollars to try and feed us information. And this is why people get frustrated. This is why I'm annoyed. And this is why I guess shows like this exist. Because we've been seeing this a long time with how corrupt these corporations are and the fact our tax dollars prop these people up and they claim, no, we're not a state broadcaster. We're just going to silence you if you don't do as we say. We could just evaporate overnight if we don't get government money, but we're not a state broadcaster. No, not at all. And that's why I'm looking forward to watching the rest of this show. Can't be censored. That was a very deliberate attempt at a title, and they say it on their website, which I think is very fascinating, is they are now the new CBC. I love the intent. I love what they're doing there. I think it's a very clever name. And if you want to listen to more of it, it's on all the podcatchers and Spotify, Google, all that. It's all there. Their website is can'tbecensored.com. If you are interested in learning and hearing more of what they're doing in the episodes they're going to release as they go on, it's a very fascinating story and the things that are happening and getting the inner workings of what's going on and the fact that this man is finally out speaking out. And this is exactly why what he's doing right now is integral to our Canadian society. It's so important to us. It's so important to our culture and so important to hear the truth of what's happening at this news network. Only because we need transparency of what's happening there. If our tax dollars are funding them, we need to know what's going on there. And the most interesting part is the fact he's still technically under contract to the CBC. Even though he's quit and has parted ways and he doesn't want anything to do with them, they aren't letting him go. So the whole legal ramifications of all this is very interesting. The fact he's being outspoken now is going to make this whole situation real fascinating. And I'll be following it along with all of you. But let's move on to our next story. Canada's TC Energy to invest $8.5 billion in new U.S. power projects. This is a big news story, specifically because of what it means for Canada, what it means for the United States as well, is in the fact that we are struggling right now up here. Everything we said was going to happen is now happening. Like our homegrown companies are now departing and now investing in other countries and not investing much here anymore. That was the thing that Mark Carney stated, right? We talked about pipelines and want to do pipelines and the fact that Mark Carney's like, yeah, we can do them. Just no one's putting up their hand to want to do pipelines. So I guess no pipelines are going to be happening. Sorry. But it's fascinating because, I don't know, Canada's TC Energy, who used to be TransCanada, is investing in gas projects, oil projects, energy projects in the States, but aren't really are starting to divest out of opportunities here in Canada. Why is that? Oh, could it be all of the bills that are constantly in the way from allowing these companies to do what they want to do and build these infrastructure projects? Could that be it? Likely. Well, here's a hint. Yes, it is. Because Mark Carney and the Liberals will get up there and say, well, no one wants to do this, so I guess we're just not going to do it. And it's like, no, the interest is there clearly. The interest is there clearly, and now those dollars are moving south of the border. Here is the CEO of TC Energy on this specific decision on Fox Business.
Canadian pipeline operator TC Energy, one of North America's leading energy infrastructure companies, betting big on America's energy future. The company is planning to invest more than $8.5 billion in U.S. projects over the next 5 years, including the Virginia Reliability Project, a major pipeline upgrade aimed at strengthening energy security and powering growth within the Commonwealth. Company also raising its full-year profit outlook, citing stronger demand for natural gas and power across North America. Joining me now, TC Energy CEO and President Francois Poirier. Francois, good morning. So you're seeing opportunity in the United States for your company. Explain.
Very much so. We see natural gas demand growing by 45 billion cubic feet a day over the next decade, and the vast majority of that being in the United States. And with the energy dominance agenda of the president, the economic growth we see, winning the AI race, it's all about energy, and natural gas is going to be the backbone.
To natural gas, important component to you, but also you mentioned.
There he says it loud and clear right there is, yeah, we like the president's politics around energy. We like what he sees with energy, and we agree that is the future, and we want to invest in a country that sees that as the future. Because right now, the leadership in Canada, they don't see that necessarily as the future. They're being pulled just kicking and screaming to get anything done in conventional energy. Why would you invest $8.5 billion in a country like that when you could just do it in the States that is actually very friendly to what you want to do? It's a fairly simple situation, which goes back to my original point. They had a decision if they wanted to invest in Canada or if they want to invest in the United States. What this shows is Carney says, well, there's no interest. Yeah, there's no interest in Canada. There's no interest in building here because, well, you've not created the environment for there to be interest. There is a lot of interest outside of Canada, but none to be invested inside Canada. Now we have Canadian companies who are now taking their dollars south of the border to invest in energy projects and get things going there. This isn't a good future for us in general. Sure, we might dabble in the LNG project and increasing capacity at some of our existing ports. There are national infrastructure projects that are on the list of Carney, things that he agreed to doing. We will see if those actually ever end up happening. It's all really just, people are not the most enthused at the moment. And by people, I'm talking about private industry. They're kind of like, oh, we'll see what Mark Carney does. We'll see what this government does in Canada. But for the time being, they're so wishy-washy. We can't simply take the chance. But we'll go to a country that is doing it, and we'll make our money there. And it really makes you wonder where this puts Canada as we're starting to see our economy continue to shrink, as inflation continues to grow, as opportunities continue to shrink, and job and employment continues to skyrocket. You start to wonder how much longer this can go. We go back to François-Philippe Champagne, who says, we are making a generational investment in Canada. That's why we're going to have a $100 billion deficit upcoming here. Yet there doesn't seem to be putting a whole lot of money and capital into things that are going to bring the country money. They're putting it into subsidies to try and keep this limping dog going. It's unfortunate. So we go back to even something Carney said during the election campaign, if you remember this.
We're fighting the Americans in the pocketbook. We have retaliatory tariffs on them. We just hit them again in the auto sector. We're fighting them on Fox News, which is what they understand. We're sending Doug Ford onto Fox News.
And then shortly after this, he talked about how we are fighting them in the courts as well. And what we've seen since this election is, well, the retaliatory tariffs, as he mentioned here, are now all but gone. Fighting them on Fox News, well, that's definitely not happening. TC Energy is going on Fox News and Fox Business these days. That's what's happening. And then as well, this news broke as well yesterday. Canada drops challenges to U.S. anti-dumping duties on softwood lumber. You know, the courts that we're fighting in, we're dropping those cases currently. Canada has dropped 2 legal challenges of United States duties on Canadian softwood lumber. The U.S. has long accused Canada's softwood lumber sector of violating rules on anti-dumping, flooding a market with cheaper, subsidized products to disrupt a domestic industry. The U.S. Commerce Department announced plans last month to nearly triple duties on Canadian softwood lumber to just over 20%. The Wall Street Journal first reported this last week that Canada dropped long-standing appeals earlier this month on 2 U.S. anti-dumping reviews dating back to the previous decade. They're now pulling back. And what is happening is the Liberal government is going to try to dress this up, saying, well, we just need to get something over the line. We just need to get a deal done with them, so we'll pull whatever we need to pull. Even though we're still right, we're going to pull it. And for those who need to know what anti-dumping is or what dumping is, it's when a government subsidizes an industry, or in this case, a good, and then they go and take that and sell it for rock bottom prices in another country to undercut their industry and their competition. And that's what the U.S. is accusing Canada has been doing in our softwood lumber industry. And Canada says that's not true, but we've been subsidizing our softwood lumber industry. We also just added another $1.2 billion to the softwood lumber industry to subsidize it so that they can continue selling. And you're going to say there's no case. Well, considering that you just dropped challenges in the courts, clearly there is a case. And it needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. But this is what's happening, is nothing is really being done in trying to make something work with the United States. So now we're just subsidizing industry, and bleeding ourselves out in the process. Oh, we'll fight them in the courts. Well, guess what? The courts don't agree with you. And now you had to pull 2 challenges out from the courts. And our core industries are now suffering because you're prideful, arrogant, and you think your way is the best way, but that way is currently killing our country. This is why we're starting to see a skyrocket, an increase of popularity for the Conservatives, and Carney has been dropping in the polls. It's for things like this. People are starting to see it. People don't care about Trump anymore. They care about what's happening here, and they don't see anything happening here. So as polls increase and polls continue to shift in favor of the Conservatives, a lot of people are making shows about that and doing, bringing light to it, which is encouraging news. Don't get me wrong. I think it is encouraging news. However, we saw what happened in the last election. Conservatives were winning. And the Liberals have done this in the past 3 elections. They find a big bad at the last second and they drive that fear home, and it works every stinking time. It's now a time for the Conservatives, as well as we as people, to make an argument that will counteract any type of fear this Liberal Party will try and instill in the Canadian people. But anyways, enjoy your day. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.
Getting drunk from 7